Hey guys, welcome back to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel. Now in today's video, we're going to be working on my 1978 Jeep J10 truck today. And today we're going to be going over the power steering and adding a power steering cooler. Now recently off camera, I actually went ahead and rebuilt the power steering box with all new seals and everything like that. That's all freshened up, ready to go. Got some new power steering lines up to our main pump right here with some new fluid as well. And figured for another 20 bucks I can put a power steering cooler. That way I won't have to worry about that thing getting too hot, and it should stay nice and cool. Now today I'm going to go over that on installing it on this Jeep right here, and I'll show you how our power steering system is all set up on this Jeep. So let's dive right in. Alright, so looking down in the engine bay, as you can tell right up top here, we got our power steering pump. Then all the way down there is our power steering box, which has two lines coming out of it. We got our high pressure line that I already replaced, as well as the return line that's just kind of zip tied right behind it right here. Kind of hard to see, but that's going to be a typical 3/8 line, and that's actually where we're going to tap in for our power steering cooler. So the overall way I'm going to have this routed is the return is going to come out of the steering box, and that's going to flow upward to our power steering cooler, and then from our power steering cooler back to the reservoir in our power steering pump. Alright, so to get started on this project, the first thing I need to do is locate where I want to mount it. And you want to usually mount it in front of the radiator. That's where it's going to get the best cooling. I'm thinking this bottom right corner right here. That way I can route the lines through the front clip over there and back into our power steering pump as well as the steering box. So the first thing that's got to go is this grill right here. Looks like it's held in by some Phillips screws on the bottom here, as well as some 1/2-inch bolts that kind of go in on the top. So I'm going to start with that, get this grill removed, and then we can see a lot better in how we're going to mount this. Alright, so with that grill out of the way, it gives us plenty of room to work in here. Now right here, this is our power steering cooler, and I'm thinking of just placing it right here, so that way our inlet and outlet are facing that way. And there's a bunch of holes over here where the wiring harness and stuff goes through behind this header panel, so it easily gets into the engine bay. Now as far as mounting it with this power steering cooler right here, this is made by Hayden, and they actually make complete kits basically. They're pretty universal. They come with a lot of stuff for mounting these. But the easiest option I could do is use the zip ties that come with this kit. Basically goes through this and through your radiator and kind of sucks it onto the backside with some isolators in between and just kind of holds it in place. I'm not too big of a fan of that because over time with vibrations, if that gets loose, it could spring a leak in either your cooler right here or your radiator, and I don't want to deal with that in the future at all. So what I'm actually going to do is build some custom brackets, basically just L brackets that bolt to this bottom piece right here of our front header panel, and it's going to come up. I'm going to use a couple of those band clamps that have like isolators on them, bolt that to that, and then it'll clamp around these ends right here, and that should hold it nice and sturdy. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly make those little L brackets, get them painted and everything like that, and then we'll be back to install this right here, and then we'll start plumbing this all up. Alright, so this is what I got going on for these brackets right here. I ended up just cutting this out of 1/8-inch steel and bending it 90 degrees on the bottom to create that little bit of a tab. And that little tab right there is going to bolt down into this flat spot right here on this front fascia. So I got one that's a little bit longer, one that's a little bit shorter, corresponding with how the cooler is going to mount. So those are going to be bolted in just like that. And then on here, as you can see, I got these isolator clamps right here. That's going to help with any vibrations so it doesn't wear any holes on this cooler at all. And I'm going to have it bolt onto these brackets in 3 locations with these loops on the end right here. So basically just going to drill a hole and then bolt it twice on the left side on this longer bracket, and then once over here on this little one, and it should go right onto this bracket. So I'm going to mark these out where everything's going to be level and everything like that. Start drilling some holes into our bracket, and then start drilling some holes down here on its front fascia. Start bolting things up, and once everything's all mocked up in place, I'll disassemble it and then just paint it quick. Since it is mild steel, it'll rust, so get that painted, and then we'll throw this on for good. Alrighty, so I got our brackets attached to our cooler right here, and last thing we had to do is just drill holes in this header panel in the Jeep. So ideally, I like to tuck this far to the right as I can, and it looks like about right there is where I want to go. Problem being is I have to be able to fit my drill in there to drill a 1/4-inch hole, since I'm using 1/4-inch hardware, and I really can't get in there. I can't get from underneath because the steering box is actually right there. This one over here shouldn't be a problem at all, but you can see we got a nice gap. We can fit our hand in between. I'll just have to use some shorter hardware right here, so that way it's not getting too close to that radiator. So I'm just going to see how I can drill these holes in here and tuck this in, but ideally that's right where I want it to be. It's about 1.5 inches up from the bottom of the radiator. That's where the grill inlet is for the air. There is a metal piece on the grill that kind of blocks the bottom of it a little bit, but I'm not too crazy about getting 100% airflow on this, but anything that the cooler can get is going to be beneficial to the whole power steering system. I was actually able to get my drill in and get that back bolt by using a smaller drill back through this hole over here. It looks like for an additional headlight if you had the Wagoneer, since they use the same front clip for the J10s and Wagoneers. But I'm going to do a final mock, and then we'll see what it looks like. There we go. That is where it's going to sit. It's 90 degrees straight up, and the radiator actually has a slight tilt backwards, so we do have a little bit more of a gap on top, but that's perfectly fine. And I like the way that turned out. That actually looks pretty good in my opinion. So I'm going to take this apart, paint these brackets real quick, and then we'll do a final assembly. Now before we bolt this in, I'm going to take some return hose and put it on these fittings on the end, since it is going to be hard to fit those hoses on there once this is all installed. So I'll get those tightened, routed through this front clip into the engine bay, and then from there we can start splicing it into our power steering pump. Alright, so while that paint is drying for the brackets, I figured I'd show you guys what all comes in these Hayden Universal Kits. So right here I got the kit 1011, which is a little bit bigger power steering cooler. They do make smaller sizes, so, and I think they even make even larger ones too, especially for transmission coolers. Obviously we have our power steering cooler right here, and then it also comes with a little bit of line, and then it also has a bag of hardware. Now these were the zip tie clamps I was talking to you about. These kind of stick through both of the radiator and that cooler, and then they got little stoppers on the back side with some rubber isolators you would put in between. That would be the quick and easy way to do it. But overall, once again, I don't like that setup, because over time if these get loose, they're just going to start vibrating and possibly wear a hole in your radiator, then your radiator shot. So also we got some hose clamps that we're going to be using that are in here as well, and it looks like we got a universal type fitting right here that would fit under power steering gearbox to fit onto that cooler hose. And also we got some installation instructions. Once again, I'll leave a link down below so you guys can check it out if you want to purchase this for yourself. They're fairly inexpensive. They're pretty cheap actually off Amazon. They're right in the $25 range or so. I've installed Hayden coolers in the past. I've actually done their transmission cooler on my 2001 Jeep Cherokee years ago. Haven't had any issues with it. Odds are I'll probably put a transmission cooler on this Jeep as well. Alright, so I've got our brackets all painted up, nice and black. They're not completely dry, but they should be good for installing on here. So we're going to install the brackets onto the cooler for the final time. We got a little bit shorter hardware on there, so we won't be running into the radiator or anything like that. So I'm going to start over here. Just using normal 1/4-inch hardware for this. I'm going to throw a washer on the back side too. Alright, so I got our brackets bolted onto there, and that looks pretty nice. The next thing I'm going to do is put our power steering hoses on here and get these clamped on, and then I'll weave them into the engine bay and then mount this onto the Jeep. And then once we get inside the engine bay, then we can cut our lengths to where they need to go. So I got some 3/8 hose right here. This is for power steering. It's a little bit different because I think it can handle a little bit more pressure, but it's basically knurled here on the outside finish. So I got our hose clamps, going to slide those on first. Just like so. And then to help this a little bit, I like putting a little bit of WD-40 on the inside here to help kind of put this on there a lot easier. Alright, that's nice and tightened, ready to go. Let's go over to the Jeep and get this installed. Alright, so I got quite a bit of slack on my hose here, so I'm going to have to weave this all the way through that little access hole. I actually have a few of the holes over here, but I'm going to pick one of them that's going to work just fine. Alright, before we get that in too far, I'm going to get our hardware ready. Just standard 1/4 inch hardware once again. And we'll keep sliding this in. There we go. I'm just going to feed on the nuts and stuff from the underside, tighten it up, and then that should be nice and secure. Alright, so I just got that back bolt tightened up. It was kind of a pain in the butt to do since, once again, that steering box is right in the way, but really had to fish that nut in there. Finally got that side tight, so I'm going to work on this and finish tightening it here. That is all tightened up. A little bit of a wiggle, but that's definitely pretty nice and solid in there. Alright, so now that all the work up here is pretty much finished up, I'm just going to button everything up and throw the grill back on, and then we can start on the work on the engine bay. I picked out some new hardware here since the other one's kind of rusty, so we'll put some anti-seize on these as well. Alright, that's all put back together with that power steering cooler back there all nice and tucked up. That looks pretty good. Alright, so it's a couple months later. This project got put on hold for a little bit as other things were going on in life, but now we're ready to finish this up. So we got everything up front all finished up. Now we're looking directly underneath the hood right here. We're looking on top of the steering gearbox. As you can see, we got two lines coming out. We got our high pressure line, and then right below that where my finger is, we have our low pressure line, and those both simply go back to the power steering pump. For that low pressure line, that's where we're going to interrupt and plumb in our power steering coolers. So right now the whole system is still full of fluid, so the best way I'm going to do is just take this lower hose off right here and just have a catch pan underneath the vehicle, and then we're just going to drain out all the fluid. It's going to be coming out of both ends, as this power steering pump needs to drain out as well from its reservoir. So I'm going to pop that off, and then we'll start fitting up some lines. We got our new lines coming in here from our power steering pump, our inlet, and our outlet that we're going to plug in here as well. So I'm going to get a screwdriver and pop off that hose clamp. Alright, so I got that draining off. That was pretty stuck on there, I'm surprised, since I didn't have that off too long ago, but got that draining down in the pan below. I just cut a slit in that power steering hose to get that off, so we'll let that drain for a little bit. And then I also want to replace a fitting that is coming out of the power steering box. I got a new one that we're going to replace as well, since this one is pretty rusty. Alright, so with that partially drained out, I'm going to start and taking off the old fitting that's on top of the power steering box. And this is the new one right here. It's basically just a little elbow with a fitting on the end. So you're going to need a line wrench to break that free. It's going to be like a 5/8 for this new one. For some reason, it's going to be a little bit bigger for 11/16. So I'm going to get under there, break that free. We'll get the old one off and then swap the new one on quick. And that line is pretty rusted onto that fitting. It's not wanting to come off at all, so hopefully it can just break off. There we go. That guy broke off, and we continue to take off this fitting. Alright, so now we got our new fitting. I'm going to fit that up here. Alright, so I got that finger tight. I'm going to orientate that to where I want it, pretty much to where it was before, and then just take my line wrench and snug that down. Alright, so for hooking up this line, the return that's coming out the power steering pump is basically going to be the feed for the power steering cooler, which is going to be the lower line right here, and that's the way I'm going to do it, so that way I don't have any air bubbles trapped in the cooler as it's running. So I'm going to lube this up, a little bit of WD-40 so it gets over that fitting. And it's going to be a little bit of a weird angle, making this U-shaped right here, but if I were to angle it more, it would be in an even weirder angle. So I'm just going to push this over. Then we got our hose clamp. We'll slide that over. And then we can tighten this guy down. So now up here on the power steering pump, we have our old line going into the back over here for the old return. That is going to be this guy tucked up here. So I got a hose clamp behind there. We're going to pop that off, and then we got this right here. We're going to cut the size, and this is going to be our new return coming from our power steering cooler. That guy's going to be stupidly tight again, so I'm just going to cut a slit in it. There we go. Then we'll just mock up with our new line where we want to cut and basically how we want to route this, so that way it's nice and tucked up neatly. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that, and we'll slip that guy on. Alright, got that shortened up. Put a little WD in here. Got our hose clamp on, and then we'll just route this on the back side. This power steering hose, I can definitely tell it's a lot more durable than a typical fuel line. Hard to cut and fit over the fittings and stuff like that. So now I'll just tighten up this hose clamp, and then we'll be ready to fill this back up with fluid. Alright, so now we'll fill this back up with some power steering fluid. For this Jeep, I use transmission fluid, Dexron 3, since that's what it calls for. So we're going to top that off and not go all the way, but pretty much to the... Ooh, a little too fast on that one. I guess that does fill up fast, but we're going to start this up and run it so that way it gets all that air out of the system. And then we'll move the steering wheel back and forth and get all that air out of the system, so this thing will be at the adequate level. Check the level right here. It went down a little bit. Alright guys, that's going to be a wrap for today's video. It was a pretty simple install on this, and just had to do a little bit of fabricating to create a mount like that. But for the price on these, they're fairly inexpensive. I think this was 20 something bucks. And same thing with transmission coolers, all by Hayden. I've had good results with them in the past. they'll save your power steering pump, they'll save your transmission, so it's worth it in the long run to get one of these plumbed in, and doesn't really take too much time either. As always, I'll post the links down below for the parts I use in this video if you guys want to try it out on your vehicle as well. So I hope you guys like this video. We got a lot more work to do here on the J10 coming up in the future, so I hope you guys stick around for that. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to post it below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.